Are we getting it twisted, or that's the way it's coming across?
I think that's the way it's coming across, but I also think it's coming across that because we're also getting it twisted a little bit. I think you hear Nigerians talk about it and they say, yes, so and so has done this. Yes, we hear this one has done that. Yes, we hear that one has done that. That's quite nice, and sometimes it is satisfying that we are dealing with all those big guys who are, you know, there's a sense of satisfaction when you hear a big man has fallen. I mean, it's like, yeah, he thought he was untouchable. It's nice.
But that's on the one hand. I mean, yes, all those figures are being reeled out, but I mean, let's take a look at the pictures that we're seeing on the front page of, I think, one of the papers there about big boats,
Yes.
you know, being caught, and what effect that has had. You know, some people, I think, was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Power, God knows, Igali, who was asked why power has improved.
Yes.
And he said that there's not been one case of gas pipeline vandalism, which was done all the time, perhaps, you know, with knowledge of some people who just simply looked the other way. Because how do you explain, for instance, that this bunkering area was very close to Government House in Port Harcourt?
Yes.
And nobody knew about it?
Well, I don't know. I think that's why I've said we need to deal with the negatives too, first of all. Well, I'm told that power has improved. A lot of reasons why power has improved, if we also be honest, is also the fact that certain projects
investments were made,
and they are just coming
to fruition.
So
because I mean, we do recall that, you know, the former Minister of Power was always talking about how, you know, the pipelines were being sabotaged, and the gas was not getting to where it was supposed to get to.
So now we have a problem. That's what happened, basically. And I think that's one of the things, the positives from the government. The fact that somewhere people get an impression that there will soon be a cloud of investigators looking at people who are doing funny things means that for some time you buy a window of people of good behavior. That's one of the things that happens. And that's why I said government should discover that the actions are more about leadership. So there is nothing wrong with the focus on a puritanical approach to government. Nobody's allowed to steal. It helps. That's why the pipeline ones are. But the challenge is that it's got to go beyond that. That's why it's got to be like, if you go to the hospital, you're a bit ill, they'll give you in those days, it used to be, you get your chloroquine injection, heavy duty first time. But at the same time, they start telling you, go and eat this, go and do that, because you're trying to get the person well. Now, we are trying to get the system well, and one of the things we had to do was take out the weeds. But what we want to see more than anything else is plant the seeds. Then the seeds will give us a future. The other government had a problem. There were seeds planted, and he gave example, and a lot of weed was also allowed to fester. So we've got to remove the weeds out of the place. But if you're going to get the people on site, you've got to give them a picture of a future that we can seek to create. And that's really what is missing, if I would say, is the one missing ingredient. What is the future? Where do I stand in that future? What happens to our nation when that future is achieved? Where do we get there? You know, that is the gap. But it doesn't take you. Like I said, the first thing you do as a leader is establish your visions. The other side of leadership is remove the obstacles to the vision being achieved. But you need to do both. But you need to decide which of the priorities. And I'm worried that our priority is going more in the chasing of the weeds than in planting of the seeds.
Again, let's also talk about preparations before you come into a leadership position or office. Some people must have been prepared to the extent that even when they're, a little bit, swayed by someone at the center, they say, no, that's not my own idea. I have something to do. Whether we like it or not, a look at what is happening in Kaduna State. Kaduna has been in the news.
Yes,
so a lot of people wouldn't even know down south and other places. Kaduna has been in the news. It would seem as if, even though his party is at the center, they have a different agenda as to what they want to do. Yes. How can someone have its own blueprint, so to speak? Because they all seem to have an agenda. Some of them were at a political debate before elections. So what stops them from actualizing what they've promised the electorates?
I think I'm glad you mentioned Kaduna, actually, because when you asked him, I said I couldn't remember any. But that's because of what has filled the news waves, has been the negatives. I think one of the reasons is probably because of the nature of the person too. If you know anything about El Rufai from Little, I've never met him personally, but I know, for example, this is a man who reads more than most people I know, who follows up on all the latest development. One of the challenges, to be honest, that you're having, which I've always said, is that many Nigerians at the top level, who are the people from whom we produce our leaders, themselves stopped reading and stopped building themselves up in personal capacity many years ago. There's a tendency in Nigeria that the moment you become somebody of note, and I don't mean head of service or anything, sometimes by the time you even become a senior civil servant, to read a book becomes a problem. To follow up on the latest, I mean, I was talking to some people yesterday who are in the education industry, and I asked them in a group of 60 of them, how many of them had ever heard of dyslexia? And only one person out of 60, principals and vice principals, had heard of dyslexia. Now, that's an emerging understanding that we've had in the last 20 years, not 10 years even. And if people who are senior people driving the agenda don't know about dyslexia, then what it goes to tell is how much capacity is being built. So one of the challenges is that they need to build their capacity. Attaining the office of a governor is not the end. It is the means to an end. It's only a platform.
Many of them see it as an end.
As an end. That was the objective. We pushed the government. It also affected the federal government. We get the other guys out of office. We have arrived. No, you have not arrived. You've only begun.
And a lot more focus needs to be on states. It's a federation.
Yes.
And many of the policies that are churned out at the center, they have a, I mean, that's what the people feel it, yes, in those states. And
they do.
One wonders, the state houses of assembly, many of them tied to the apron strings of the executive, stand to be corrected when we see it. And then the question then is, several protests in those states about non-payment of salaries, as much as they may say, yes, the dwindling oil prices, but what do they come to the table with?
First of all, the state government can't talk about the dwindling oil prices as the reason why they haven't paid salaries, because the oil prices did not drop in one day. They had a direction. If you know that you have a source of income coming, there's a problem we have in the country, and it started with the military era. We got to become a unitary state that had the facade of a federal state. It looked as if we were a federal state, but in practice, the center controlled everything. Now, that has created a problem. Now, the state governors have so much power, and that is also true. They have so much power, but very little scrutiny. And in the state, because they are smaller, they're able to hound out all opposition. So you find that our states, very few of our states have what you call an almost even divide in terms of the national, in their House of Assembly. If you go to most states, one party is 90% of the House of Assembly.
Even when that happens,
yes.
I mean, after the elections, if that happens, what you find invariably is that most people will convert.
Yes.
Almost immediately.
Convert almost immediately. Exactly.
To the dominant party.
Dominant party. So the result is that there is no questioning. You create a herd grouping. And maybe the media can help a little bit too by doing a lot more focus, because we're talking about federal government and Sheikh Gaba talking about 100 days and all this stuff. The truth is that if you go to state government, you get a lot much worse. In most state governments, you will get literally complete raw propaganda. I mean, almost like nobody's asking the other question, what have we not done? And the truth about it is that it's healthy for a nation for that debate to continue, because first of all, nobody has a monopoly of wisdom. So even with the best of intentions, a governor who does not know how to create an opportunity to hear an alternative opinion will soon find people saying the king is well-dressed when the king is naked. And it's only when the nakedness of the king goes public that it becomes an embarrassment. Basically.
Always a pleasure to have you on, Mr. Ditokunbo Bayo, a leadership consultant, clearly identifying communication. That's one of the things that need to be corrected as we move on. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us.